everybody. Welcome back to another original versus remake. And today we're talking about, we're in spooky season, so we're going to get in right into the horror, and we're going to be talking about Evil Dead versus Evil Dead, the original from 1981 and its 2013 remake. And, right off the top, Dennis, did you see these movies before?
So I have seen the original Evil Dead like 15 years ago and never bothered with the remake. So this was essentially first time viewing of both of them for me because it's been so long for one and never seen the other.
Ah, okay, perfect. These actually, the 2013 one for me, I hadn't seen in a good amount of time. I think this is only the third time I've ever actually watched it. The original one for a very long time was my favorite of the entire Evil Dead franchise, which was started by Sam Raimi, who people might know from the Spider-Man trilogy of movies, and obviously some other great films throughout the 1990s, The Quick and the Dead, A Simple Plan, which I think is fantastic. So, very famous guy. But this was his first movie that he made for, I think, like $375,000 with his buddies in the woods with Bruce Campbell. I always admired the film, but my opinion might have changed.
I hope it did because mine is not as positive as yours seems to be. And what I'll say to start is that you can tell that this was whatever money we have in our pockets and our parents gave us to make this movie in some shed we found abandoned in the woods, we're going to give it a shot.
Yeah, no, and it really does show. Like the biggest flaw of the original one, I'm going to say right out of the gate, is 100%, even from Bruce Campbell, the acting.
Absolutely, 100% agree. It There are parts in this movie where you kind of are taken out of the fear part because there's supposed to be like this demonic entity, this presence taking over everyone's body or whatever, and they are very nonchalant. Like even in the scared scenes, his scared face is just like, and that's it. Like he doesn't scream, he doesn't yell, he just like there's the one part where I'm pretty sure it's his girlfriend or now fiance, whatever she is sitting there like dead and possessed, and he just looks at her like, "Oh, this is weird," and he just seems not afraid in any way. So why the hell am I supposed to be afraid?
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely the biggest flaw is that, but also, I try and forgive it a little bit because they didn't have money. The movie itself is pretty interesting concept. It's just like they find this Book of the Dead in this abandoned cabin, and when you read it, unfortunately, it brings the dead back to life. But they never really truly explain like what they are until like Evil Dead 2. It's just like kind of like all of a sudden they're just possessing everyone, and there's just no way to escape. If you try and leave, it ain't gonna happen. The tree might rape you. Like these are the kinds of things that happen.
Yeah, which I didn't know there was such controversy around because like
Well, it's
when I
81.
yeah, so like I try when we go into these, even if it's a movie I've seen a bunch or like this where I've really only ever seen the original Evil Dead once and never seen the remake. I try not to do a lot of research before watching because I don't want anything skewing my opinion of it. I want to just be me going in and forming my own opinion about the movie without any bias. So I didn't read a lot, but then after I watched, I looked up other people's reviews and everything, and that tree thing made a lot of people upset.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It just shows how we got desensitized as time goes on. Because when I watched the movie for the first time, it didn't bother me at all. I didn't even think twice about it. But I was born in the generation that after South Park came out. So I mean, South Park. We were before South Park, but we were young when it came out. So we kind of these things just didn't bother us. But I guess if you were like an older woman or like a middle-aged woman in the 80s and you saw like a tree raping that just can't be.
Yeah, no, and we also, we've seen The Hills Have Eyes and The Last House on the Left, and nowadays, I mean, the Terrifier movie is one of the most popular horror movies ever, and that is appalling in the things that he does in that film. But again, we're just kind of like, yep, it's another horror movie.
Yep. And I guess maybe that's why it's kind of like it doesn't necessarily work as much as I think we've seen everything that this movie might have spawned. So I try and appreciate it because they made it with such little money. They made it with like the Coen brothers too. Like I like the stuff like where the camera's moving. Apparently they just set up a wood board and put the camera on it, and two guys on the side, and they would just move it, and then they sped up the film so it gives it that like ghost running through the woods kind of look or running through the house. That stuff I really admire. I also really admire the special effects. I like them. They're very cheesy, not great, but I actually like it because of that.
Yeah, so I will give that one of my biggest critiques of this is actually the camera work, but I will say that part of it I like where they're running through the woods and the trees are falling. as this like presence is sprinting through the forest. I think that's really cool. But they did a lot of stuff that it was just zoomed in on everybody's eyeballs for like 15 straight seconds. And you're sitting there like, Jesus Christ, move along. Or like it's, you can tell they were trying to be like shock sort of. It felt like they were just ripping off the Texas Chainsaw Massacre essentially with all their quick cuts and the what they were trying to pull off with kind of like the gritty feel. And to me, it just was like redundant and didn't match because there was no sense of dread at all this whole film.
Yeah, and I think that's because there's. I still think because of that tree raping scene and some other elements, this is supposed to be a horror comedy, but it's too far leaning into like trying to scare you, and that, like you said, like there really is no sense of dread because it's still a little funny. I think Sam Raimi masters it with Evil Dead 2. And I used to think like, oh no, the original one was the best, but I think I was just like being a little pretentious. I truly believe the second one is the best one, which is it's kind of a remake in itself. I don't know when the last
Mhm.
time you watched Evil Dead 2, but it literally just starts off the same way, no explanation. We shrink the cast. He's just kind of there with his girlfriend now. His sister's gone, the other guy's gone. That's all not there, the other guy, and that's it. It's just the two of them until we add other characters, and that feels more like a more focused film compared to the original one.
Yeah, I almost it seems like one of those things where they said, "Let's make this. I think this will be pretty good." And they genuinely went in believing that this was going to be a scary movie. Maybe back then it was, and that's the hard thing about it right now. Like modern times, this falls so flat in the horror genre. Like it is not scary. None of it is scary. But maybe then they thought it would be. And maybe the reception was a little bit like, "This is kind of hilarious," because you could tell Evil Dead 2 takes a turn hard into the comedy part of it, where they just abandon all horror and they're like, "This is just gonna kinda be a spoofy, funny kind of film where we dive into the fact that, yep, it's cheesy, it's corny, there's tons of comedic elements to it." So I almost wonder if, like, the first one fell flat in terms of horror, and that made them turn Evil Dead 2 into what it was, which to me probably saved this franchise because that's now what it is. Like it became successful based on Evil Dead 2.
100%. What happened is like they made this, and Sam Raimi, I believe, went on made another project. It didn't do well, and then they decided to go back to the well with Evil Dead 2 because this movie was very successful. I told you, $375,000. It made, I believe, $25 million at the box office. So, makes a household name out of him and Bruce Campbell. Let's get everyone back together, make the Evil Dead 2. And you're right, like they had money probably now, and they were able to make the movie lean into the comedy. And then they made Army of Darkness, which is a complete follow up to this, and that is just that's a comedy in my opinion. 100% Looney Tunes comedy, all stop motion effects. And then eventually, I think what happened is they kind of wanted to go back to the well, but like do a reimagining. I think because like yeah, it has a lot of the same elements, but the remake is very much a reimagine, retelling in a new kind of way, adding a whole new element to the Evil Dead franchise. That I think saved it because I mean, Evil Dead Rise came out a couple years ago, and that was great too.
Yeah, I agree. And again, not this is not meant to be, like a bash fest on the original. It's hard to put yourself in the time, because it also came out in the 80s, which is when we had a lot of campy slasher films going on. So it was successful for that reason. I feel like that was kind of the boom, right? Like 70s created a lot of great horror, but 80s was the boom. That's when we got everything we know today that we call classic was 80s. And falls into that category. And they tried. I figured you would like the effects because when we did our Dawn of the
Yeah.
Dead one, I said the reason I was pulled out of it was the zombie effects were so bad, and you said you loved it. And these zombies or demons, whatever you want to call them in this, they reek of that 80s cheesy makeup effect. Like they're throwing up milk, basically. Like it was bad.
Yeah, well, that's all stuff that yeah, it checks a lot of boxes. And I'm learning a lot about myself lately when I'm recommending movies to people and the ones that I like. Like, I don't know if you saw Long Legs and liked it or The Monkey, but I really like both those movies. And I recommend them to people and they come out and I'm like, I didn't really like it. And I'm like, there's just certain things that I personally like. And I do like bad 80s effects, that 80s tone. Like, it's just clearly a smoke machine in the woods. I don't care. I like that. It looks cool to me. I like that tone and atmosphere than more than when we get like to a more polished, which is clearly a 2010s horror film, in my opinion, the Evil Dead remake. I'll always give the check mark for the look, tone, and the cinematography of the original, no matter how bad some of the stuff is in it. just on personal flair. But I don't fault anyone for disagreeing with me on that. I can clearly tell as time has gone on that that's just something that appeals to me.
Yeah, and listen, I like, I'm a huge fan of the '80s stuff too. I love the slasher films from that, and a lot of the Friday the 13th and the Nightmares and all those are super cheesy. The sleepaway camps and all that stuff, really cheesy. But I think it has to be balanced out with like a decent character development or something. Like at least those have Jason and Michael and Freddy and all those, like Leatherface. They're all in it, so you have someone in there you care about. These are difficult because like the acting is so poor and everything. But I will say physical effects, like going in the woods and doing a smoke machine, better than CGI smoke in the, like I will always, always favor actual practical physical effects, not CGI. In the remake, it definitely has that, we talk about it a lot, especially when we do our horror remakes. They throw that Hollywood lipstick, they give that Hollywood facelift to these films, and it is sleek and clean, and millions of dollars went into it. Sometimes that does kind of handcuff it as well, but I don't know about you, but in my opinion, it actually kind of helped with this one.
Well, what helped this one for me the most is definitely the plot. The original one's plot, like, it's very simple. We release something out here and it's taking us all over one by one until we're down to one person essentially. And is he going to survive or not? And that's it. And that's clearly what you do when you have a low budget and, make a simple movie, simple premise. It's about the effects and that works. But this time they try to add an element of we're going to this cabin to help our friend who has a drug addiction. I mean, you can clearly tell the whole movie is an analogy for drug addiction right from the beginning, like the opening scene where like it's another daughter and like the father's like, "Oh no, you killed her." And it's like, if said anyone with a drug addiction, it tears your family apart, not just you. And I think like this is one where she tore the family apart. And now this other girl's coming in with her friends and her brother, and they're trying to help her. And it's like almost like the same thing happened again, if I'm reading it right.
Yeah, yeah, where they say, that basically her brother left and her friends were left to take care of her, and she already overdosed once and died, but was brought back to life. And this is the second time that they're coming back to this cabin, which that's kind of my biggest issue with this movie, actually, is that this is the second time they're coming back to this cabin to do this for this girl. And there's no, like, elaboration on whose cabin it is. Like, how do they not know that a woman was burned to death here and someone broke into this cabin, but they're fine? Like, it's totally run down and decrepit, and it looks like it hasn't been cared for or lived in like 30 years. But they claim they were just here last year doing the same thing. Like, that stuff, that part of it kind of doesn't add up to me. But I do agree with, like, it definitely is a metaphor the whole way, which does carry it a little bit more. Because, like you said, the
Yeah.
original is like bunch of friends going to some cabin. We got it really cheap. Woohoo! This is fun, and that's it. There's no meat to that whatsoever.
No, they have a reason for being there, and it's a good reason. It definitely reeks of like, we were talking before we went on air about the Scream films and how the Scream films are always commenting on like modern horror films. Well, this definitely has that modern horror where the lead character has trauma, which we've seen in horror films for like the last like 15 years, and even crossing over to like regular films is like just look at Thunderbolts. Like everyone's got these like traumatic events that drags them down. Everybody in this movie is a little bit, the acting might be bad in the original. The acting isn't the greatest necessarily in this movie either. A bunch of very moody kind of like, young adults.
Yeah, it's a very like moody teenager kind of atmosphere that we get, which it does hinder it a little. I just always think of Family Guy when they're doing a bunch of scenes and they shoot one movie. I don't remember what it was, but it's like a werewolf movie, and they have all of the spoof characters. There's the rich kid and the moody one and the artist one and all that it feeds into all that. It also uses the old cliche of, to beat this, you have to die, and then we'll bring you back to life. I feel like that's been done a million times over, where like the only way to beat this, Final Destination did it, Fear Street did
Mhm.
it, this did it, so many movies, the only way to defeat this demon is to die and then we'll resuscitate you. They do that in this. It's very like by the numbers horror. um there are some cool homages though. I feel like they sitting on the car in the beginning, that's the car that they drove up in the original. They have the guy pulls the tarp off the toolbox and the chainsaw is there. I feel like there's even a Friday 13th reference. I don't know if you got that when she's looking at She goes towards the end, the our main girl reaches for something to defend herself, and it's a machete. And then at
Yes.
first, she's, like, about to grab it, and then she's, like and looks up and sees a chainsaw instead and goes for the chainsaw. I felt like that was a little, like, Friday the 13th nod.
I thought it was a nod, or I thought it was like we're better than them because think
Yeah,
about it. They saw the machete. And it's like, what's a knife gonna do when there's a fucking chainsaw right here? You could also look at it as Pulp Fiction because that's exactly what happens in Pulp Fiction too, except he puts the chainsaw down and grabs a sword, but very similar scene.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that, little homages, but where this one I think does excel, the possessed entities, once someone does become possessed, I think they did a really good job, and it's funny because it's very minimal. I think the original went over the top with their makeup and everything to make them what they thought was scary. This one's minimal. It's like their contact lenses and a little bit of blood drooling from the mouth, and they just always look wet. But the way they do it, it's a pretty scary, like possessed look, and I think that helps this along. Also, the atmosphere, you feel wet and cold with these characters when they're in the rain and you see their breath in the air, and they're constantly soaked, and I feel like you feel a little bit more in the environment in this remake than you do in the original.
Oh, 100%. Like, it actually feels disgusting and gross and not like, unfortunately, the original kind of feels like they're making a movie, whereas this one definitely the entire time you have that sense of dread, that unbelievable, like, we can't escape. Like, again, like the original, they try to escape, but there's just no way. The house will keep dragging them back. Yeah, plenty of homages throughout, but I do think that that does ground it a little bit more. But I'm still going to give the edge on the effects to the original, again, just because of personal taste, even though this is a much more realistic, natural approach. And like, if you're watching and you want something like what would really happen, yeah, if someone got this is more logical than like them turning into like spider webs growing on their arms and like this like purple green puke coming out and everything. I just like that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, if you're going for something, and I understand it's like just like Dawn of the Dead and its remake, where it's like this is probably the more we're going for a different approach. I appreciate that, and it's more realistic. It works. Still gonna go with the original for me though.
Interesting. I will say, listen, I get it, and I feel
On the
like what
effects.
happens well, on the effects, yeah, and I get that. Because they're practical, I do always appreciate that. I will say, though, even, like, cinematography-wise, there really isn't much aside from the running in the woods scene, which they accomplish in the remake as well. Um, there wasn't really any standout moments in the original, but I will say at the end of the remake, that shot of her standing outside with the burning cabin behind her and the blood that's just pouring out of the sky, that stood out to me. That was really nice.
That was awesome. That is a very memorable scene from this movie. It makes the movie very memorable, that ending with the blood. It's actually pouring blood. It's fantastic. And, it's again, you gave us kind of a false ending. Like, we thought she was dead. We didn't even think we were getting a final girl in this movie. And it's kind of sad, too, because of how the one character dies right before. Like, you kind of think he's going to, pull through. But unfortunately, no, no.
Yeah, not quite. And then the last homage in this one, she does lose her hand.
Yep. Well, she should have
Gotta
been
lose the
careful.
hand.
Gotta lose the hand. I mean, that's the main villain, main antagonist in the second one. His hand.
Yeah, I will say, I do feel like it's very hard to do these primarily because, like we said, we're modern times. We're way more desensitized than 80s fans and crowds were. So that original probably was terrifying. The effects were probably terrifying. Everything like that for the time was really done well. We have a lot of newer stuff, a lot of new technology, better camera work. Acting should be better than it was. Things like that make it difficult, and especially in the horror genre. I love horror movies, especially these kind of 80s. I love 70s, 80s kind of campy movies like this, but I feel like it's almost like in the horror community, if once a movie reaches that classic level where they consider it a classic horror film, it's almost like an endangered animal where they hire an entire like militia to protect it. And I
Mhm.
think if you speak out against classic horror films, you run the risk of like really upsetting the broad horror community. So I don't a lot of that I think plays into how fondly people remember this just because it's a classic, you have to love it. But personally, I see a lot of issues with it, and I do these rankings strictly on rewatchability. Am I gonna go back and rewatch this, or would I be willing to? And the original doesn't have much. A lot of it annoyed me more than anything. I felt like they spent 15 minutes on that girl just sitting with her legs crossed, laughing in the doorway. That annoying. It wasn't even scary. It was an annoying laugh.
I think that, yeah, probably back in the 80s, that was like to make you uncomfortable the amount of time they spent on it. I also think it was filler for them because the movie's only 85 minutes, and like we talked about the low budget, just kind of fill in the holes. And if this still happens, I just watched an indie horror film recently where I was like, it's 86 minutes, but it really feels like it was a movie that should have been a 45-minute short film. And this
Y
is based on a proof of concept, but I also do feel like it is still a proof of concept of what Sam Raimi, the director, can do.
Yeah, and, again, not taking away from them, what they accomplished on such a small budget and obviously in one setting for an entire film, especially given the things that they were able to pull off, like you said, the effect of, the spirit running through the woods and all that stuff. What they pulled off was impressive for the time. There's a lot of it that bothers me, and not bothers me in an uncomfortable way. I think like in Tarantino movies, he does this, like the tension building in scenes where he spends a long time on one scene, but he does it in a way that you feel anxious and you feel the tension, and it evokes an emotion, and you like are invested in the scene. This one, there were a lot of scenes they spent so long on that I was just like, I'm about to fast forward until we get to the next part.
No, I get that. I really do. And that's kind of like how my opinion changed on it this time around. Unfortunately, like this used to be like my favorite one in the series. I would say now the original one is probably it might be at the bottom, but only just because like I don't know how often I'm gonna rewatch it now. I felt like you said, it's like almost feels like a sin, like in the way the communities kind of will react to it. But on this show, we believe in being honest, and if you feel a certain way about a movie, it's how you feel about a movie. Like we can admire that the film and what it did, it started a franchise that's still going to this very day, a successful franchise. Without it, you don't end up with the remake, but you can just also still say with being honest that it might not hold up as well. And I think even Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi would say that. Like, I mean, they got better as you went on. Like, this is your first movie. Like, Bruce Campbell, never the world's greatest actor, but he knew exactly what lane to play in. And the original one, he feels like a young amateur actor who hasn't acted much before. So unfortunately, when you compare it to the sleek remake, which actually has a great plot to it, I don't think it matches up. And I'm not the biggest fan of the remake either. It's not like that's my favorite one of the franchise. I still think like 2 and Army of Darkness, and I even put Rise above it. So these would actually be the bottom two for me. But I do think that the remake is still slightly above the original just because of the plot and these facts and raining blood, man. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and again, it's not like a landslide by any means, because I'm in no way saying the original sucks, and in no way saying the remake is light years beyond. It's just I look at it as in a few ways. Did I enjoy it? In this one, the remake I enjoyed more. Would I go back and rewatch it? I would go back and rewatch the remake more likely I would than the original. And then I think about like if I were to take someone like my wife or a buddy of mine who didn't like, who had never seen these and was trying to get into horror, which one of these do I think they would like? It's like the old wrestling adage, like the casual fan. You have your hardcore fans who will die on the hill that Evil Dead the original is the greatest thing that's ever come out. But there's like 50 of you. To make money, a movie needs to appeal to millions of people. So if I sat people down in front of both of these films, I could see right now my wife watching the first one, or any of my buddies watching the first one being like, what the hell is this? This is so dumb. They watch the remake and be like, oh, that was kind of scary. So those are kind of my criteria to pick which I think takes kind of wins the battle. And for that reason, I agree with you. I think the remake just rewatchability, casual fan appeal, and my personal enjoyment. The remake does edge this one out. Again, like you said, Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness are beyond both of these, but it's not called best in the series. It's
Nope.
original versus remake.
You respect the title. And
Yeah.
one last question before we get into our final thoughts and the score and all. Do you think that they could possibly charge the tree with rape or nah?
I gotta be honest with you, that vine kinda comes out of nowhere, so it's gonna how long is it? Who's gonna trace it back to what tree? What if it just cuts off of the tree? When the cops are fresh on the trail, they could just cut the vine right off.
And
I
you don't
think
wanna
it's
be and you don't wanna make the mistake of, like, convicting the wrong tree and chopping it down when it's like, "Oh, shit, you can't put it back on, it's over," so you better get it right the first time.
yeah, yeah, and I don't think anyone's gonna, if Bruce Campbell hasn't done it already, I don't think anyone can.
No, I agree. And that's will bring our score since we both agree. We'll put the poll out. Our last poll for Roadhouse, 90% for the original, 10 for the remake. Makes a lot of sense. A lot of people felt the same way as us that the remake is fine, but the original is the original, so it's kind of hard to get close to that. This one, I think me and you might get roasted a little bit in the comments. I don't know though, because we were surprised with Dawn of the Dead, so we'll have to wait and see. But for this one to go now, it's getting closer. 4 for the original and 3 for the remake.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. I think that, I didn't think we'd agree on this one. Usually, I'm the remake guy, you're the original guy, but, this might be this. I agree. I think we're getting roasted. I think the horror community, that protective community, is going to say that there's no shot and we're disrespecting the genre. But we got to follow our hearts, and our hearts are in the same place on this one.
Yep, that's all you guys can do is follow your hearts, and that's what we're gonna do right here. So, yeah, as always, let us know in the comment section which one you like more. We'll put the poll out, and we'll report the next time around. What are we doing for the next original versus remake? Do you remember? Did we decide on it
So
yet?
I mentioned I the one you're not happy about. I know what you did last summer because a remake just came out.
Yeah, it's out now, isn't it? So you can watch it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess we have to do that one then, don't we?
I just feel like it's spooky season, it's a scary movie, and the remake is brand new. So
Mhm.
it makes sense. We don't have to, but I'm just saying that it's on topic.
All right. Well, let's set it in stone then. All right. Yeah, that's it. We'll do that one. It's very rare we do movie. Actually, you know what? Who knows? I haven't seen the remake. Maybe I'll like it. Like I'm not a big fan of the original, but I've been proven wrong before. If I didn't watch this one, I would have came on here and said the original, even that was still the best. So things change.
Yeah, fingers crossed that you actually like at least one of them.
I hope so. I hope I don't feel like I'm wasting my time, but we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, guys, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about us, and we'll see you on the next one around.